Okay, great. So let me just talk through what's happening. So, every organization in the world is struggling through some key tensions, which is basically slide 3. We're turning brands into experiences. We're turning products into services. We're trying to use community to extend ourselves. And the big challenge that everybody has is how do you organize for this future? Slide 4 shows the fact that all of our projections about the world are linear, and yet the world is growing exponentially because of information. The next slide talks about the fact that every industry is becoming an information-based industry. We used to have in the past, all of our business models and revenue and value creation came from the physicality of the world. And that's where we lived for a very long time. And then we added products like the Kindle or iPhone, where the product might be physical, but all the revenue is digitally driven, right? And with the rise of mobile and internet, we have now entire industries that are completely digital with very little physical manifestation. And what we find is when you digitize this world, you end up with a very disruptive environment. And that leads to a fairly fundamental demonetization. And now I'm on slide 6 and 7. And what we find two things happening to the business models. One is that the metabolism is accelerating. We're seeing very radical increase. I'm on slide 7 right now it used to take 20 years to create $1 billion marketplace, and now we're seeing that happen in months. But more importantly, we're finding that when you digitize, you have a deflationary dynamic in an industry. But anyway, we find this demonetization taking place where the metabolism increases. And then on slide 8, we see that what happened to the newspaper business when you digitized it. And we see this deflationary cliff hit. And slide 9 shows the same thing for the music industry, where we saw revenues drop 10x within 2 to 3 years. And one of the biggest challenges in the digital transformation world today is where's the money? And the incumbents are all stuck with old scarcity business models, and they have a very difficult time. If you note the music industry, it used to be based on scarcity, and you were literally selling the physical media, the cassette, the CD, the DVD. But now it's a streaming platform, and all of the 8 major music studios have disappeared, and there's basically iTunes and Spotify left, right? And so this is the enormous challenge. And it's this whole digital to linear to exponential transition that we have a tough time with. On slide 11, you see the cost of LiDAR units, which is it used to cost $75,000, and now they cost $50, and the next version will be $10. And you see here an incredibly clear example of how fast this is moving, because in this one unit, this one application, you have multiple technologies that are accelerating. And I think slide 12 really highlights this. Slide 12 shows the actual, in the black, you see the actual growth of solar energy. And what you see in all those colored lines is the predictions of the world energy experts all going linear whenever there's an exponential curve. And if I could suggest to you to study this graph carefully, it's really important to note that whenever you have an exponential growth in a domain, the experts in that domain go linearly. They cannot grok in their heads this pattern. And we see this on the next slide very clearly, where we brought together 80 CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and we asked them, how aware are you of the technologies? And most had very little idea. And on the next slide, you see the results after the 4 days of giving them enough awareness of what's coming. 80% of them realized that they'll have a game-changing impact within 2 years. So this is the incredible gap that needs to be bridged. The world's business leaders have no idea about the technologies coming, and when they realize it, there's this oh heck moment, and I'm using the very polite Canadian expression. If we script through to slide 17, this is basically an image of the Hyperloop, and today any entrepreneur can enter a legacy industry and totally disrupt it, right? Elon Musk has no experience in the car sector, energy sector, public transportation sector, or space, and he's creating market leaders in all of them. And I'll give you what Elon's secret is. He looks at a technology that's growing exponentially, and he aims 10 years out. Where will this technology be in 10 years, right? And then he aims to build a company to intercept that curve in the 10-year period. And so if you intercept the curve, because it takes about 10 years to build a global business, you go very quickly after that. And so that's his secret. But think of the idea that anybody can enter a legacy environment and disrupt it today. So then the next question in the next slide says, okay, what's next? How do we deal with this? How do we adapt to this? And we see on slide 19 that whereas all of our industries are being disrupted, so are all of our business functions. IT is fundamentally different today than it was a few decades ago. By the way, I think the CIO is the toughest job in the world today, because you have to lead the disruption, the digital disruption on one side, and yet you're dealing with the security aspects on the other side. And the quote on the next slide from David Rose, I think, is the most fundamentally important quote that we've seen. David makes the point that any organization built for success in the 20th century is doomed to failure in the 21st, right? And he makes the point, but he makes the point that all of our organizations are built with top-down hierarchical structures, right? And designed for scarcity and designed for managing scarcity. Now, then we looked at this research and we looked at the 100 organizations scaling very quickly, and the book came out of that. And let me cover in a couple of minutes what we think about when we talk about exponential organizations. The definition that we have on slide 22 of exponential organizations is that we are seeing a new breed of organization that is operating at a minimum 10x better, faster, cheaper than its competitors. On the next slide, you see a basket of some of them. The most dramatic one on this slide, on slide 23, is obviously GitHub, which was actually the highest rated EXO in our index ever. It had scored 76 out of 84 in the survey that we have on how flexible and adaptable your organization is. And many of you are aware that it got bought last week for $7.5 billion with no assets, no workforce, only running community and algorithms, basically. And so you can see, you can create unbelievable value in this. A couple of examples of this are the next slide. TED was a nice high-end conference. Chris Anderson took it over and did three things. He announced a huge purpose, ideas worth spreading, allowed anybody to TEDx event, and then gave away all the TED Talks on YouTube. And in 10 years, he's created a global media brand, right? So you can take a legacy environment, apply a set of principles, and blow it open to a global level at zero cost, by the way. So that's what's possible today. The next slide shows you Local Motors, which is a car company that operates this way. So even in a traditional environment, here you have a company that is blowing away the status quo by multiple orders of magnitude at multiple levels. And the big question is, if you have a legacy organization, how do you adapt to this? You know, your old tactics were either buy it, shut it down, which isn't possible today because there's so many of them. Option two is to lobby the government and legislate them out of existence, but that now takes too long. If you think of the success of Uber, Uber succeeds by deliberately breaking the law, leapfrogging to public acceptance, and then waiting for policy to catch up, right? The option three is find out what they're doing and bring it back into your organization. And the next slides go into the model of the EXO. And let me cover that really quickly. There are three components that go into building exponential organizations. Slide 27 shows the very first one, which is the massive transformative purpose. And on slide 28, you see some examples of this. It's the tagline with a social purpose, like Google organizes the world's information, or Uber is everybody's private driver, that kind of creates the North Star for the organization. Every single exponential organization in the world has one of these. By the way, 3 years ago, Paul Pullman, the CEO of Unilever, ordered every brand in Unilever to take on an MTP. And as of 6 months ago, the 5 most profitable brands are the ones that took it on the most, right? So we see the model really biting now. If you go 2 slides further, we see the next component of EXOs, which is the externalities that these companies are using to scale very quickly. So today you can keep a very small resource footprint and use one or more of these to scale very fast. Uber doesn't hire its own staff. TED is using community. Google is using algorithms. Airbnb is leveraging other people's bedrooms, and so on. Then you have digital models, engagement, incentive prizes, gamification, et cetera, right? So that's the externalities that these companies use to scale very fast. 2 slides down, you see the 5 internal mechanisms that they're using, which maps to the acronym IDEAS. So to manage the internal control framework and drive culture, We have interfaces. Uber with its drivers has developed very custom interfaces, real-time dashboards to track and instrument the business in real time. The experimentation is the whole lean startup methodology. Then the last one is social technologies like Slack, Yammer, Chatter. And if you implement peer-to-peer collaboration and communication, we have very good evidence that that is much better than the top-down command and control patterns. If you have that, you actually don't need the organizational structure. And we have decentralized org structures now, like Valve Software, which has no CEO, no reporting lines, no job descriptions, no management meetings, or middle management of any kind, right? And yet they get more revenue per employee than Microsoft. The next slide shows maybe the poster child of this concept called autonomy, where we have a company hire, a Chinese appliance manufacturer, 55 million fridges and ovens a year by 80,000 people. And they, a few years ago, the CEO got rid of the entire top-down classic hierarchical pyramid. And they now operate with 2,000 autonomous teams of about 40 people each. Now, anybody in the traditional world would tell you if you want to make 55 million fridges, you have to have a ton of centralized product strategy, demand forecasting, inventory management. Turns out you don't. You know, who knew? They've literally tripled their market cap by doing this pattern. The next slide shows you kind of a summary of all of these attributes, we found that if you take these, they all have an MTP. Every single exponential organization has to have that massive purpose. But then if you fully implement 4 out of the 10, you get a 10x performance improvement in your organization. So really interesting question is which 4 are right for this. The next slide shows us going on CNBC 4 years ago. And what we did was we actually ranked the Fortune 100, ranked by their EXO score, ranked by that score that tells how flexible and adaptable your organization is. And on the next slide, you see the Fortune 100 actually ranked by how flexible their organization is. And you can see a lot of technology companies at the top. If you skip 2 slides down to slide, anyway, whatever 2 slides further is, you'll see the fascinating results. Go 1 more, and you'll see if you had invested in the top 10 most flexible organizations in our index, you would have outperformed the S&P by 3x. So here are the top 10 in the Fortune 100 ranked according. So we have a really interesting strategy, which is go to every public stock market, rank the companies, and invest in the top 10, and that will outperform the rest. Because as the external world is getting more volatile, your ability to adapt is going to drive market performance, right? And so this is the enormous possibility here. So let me go to what should big companies do, and I'll just touch on, if you skip 2 slides forward, I'll touch on this and then we'll close it out for now, which is, we have 2 suggestions. One is to update your leadership, that we are in a new world. This is a critical thing. If your C-suite is not aware and your board, we have a big problem. Take for example, BMW. Their tagline is that we're the ultimate driving machine. But we're pretty clear nobody's going to be driving. So that's quite an enormous tension that they have to navigate. And the next slide shows maybe the poster child of the company that's figured this out, which is Apple. Apple, yes, they have a great technology supply chain and a great design capability, but I will argue that Apple's true innovation is organizational, okay? Because what they do, unlike any other company in the world, is they'll form a small team that's very disruptive. They'll take them to the edge of the organization. They'll keep them completely stealth, and they'll say to them, go disrupt another industry. And nobody does this, right? So they started with music, and then phones, and then tablets. So today what you do is to solve for the future, you do incremental change in the mothership, and you do disruptive ideas at the edge pointing into adjacent areas. And if it starts to succeed, do not bring it back in, because it will not fit neatly anywhere. Spin it off. And you see Google doing this with Alphabet, breaking up the company and so on. You'll see this in very clear relief. IKEA is now doing this vertical farming. Microsoft, by the way, has done an amazing job in moving from a product sales to a subscription model. But IKEA is now creating vertical farms. So they're taking their core capabilities and going into an adjacent space. Of course, there's a ton of extra spare parts left over when you finish building that thing. The next slide shows you some of the work I'm doing today, which is how do you solve the immune system problem? And a lot of the work we do now at the EXO Foundation is, so we've created a 10-week process that we call an EXO sprint, that moves leadership, culture, management thinking 3 years ahead in 10 weeks inside an organization. And we've done this now a dozen times with Procter & Gamble, TD Ameritrade, HP, Visa, Black & Decker, etc. And we're open sourcing this process. So I'm going to pause there. I'll hang on the line a little bit for Q&A, but in case I lose you folks, it's been great to be here. Let me mute for now, and then we'll pick it up later.
Everyone, we've got some questions for Salim. What I'd like you to do actually is, if you don't mind just typing a message in the chat, we can ask the question, or if you are ready to call one out, please go ahead. If I could also ask you to just limit the questions to clear, concise, just one question, that would be great. If not, I'll get us going with one question, Salim. Salim,
sure.
You obviously through EXO Works, you run workshops with organizations to help them transition across. Can you give us a bit more of a run through kind of how you approach that, and what's the first most important thing you do? You've covered a bit of this in terms of the MTP scale and ideas, but I'd love to have your thoughts on that.
Sure. So I think about the idea that if you try disruptive innovation in any legacy organization, the immune system attacks you, right? So the way we run the sprint is we do an opening workshop with all of the senior management. We do a half-day kind of very disruptive singularity style shock and awe type of workshop to wake them up and show them they have existential threat facing them. I literally can't spot a single industry that is not ripe for disruption today. And so that's one piece of it. Then we take 25 young leaders, future lieutenants of the business, and they actually do the work. They break into two streams. One stream is looking at what would you do at the edge of the business to blow it open to a new industry. Nestle and Nespresso would be a good analog, right? Nespresso was struggling inside Nestle. The CEO finally put it outside the business, and boom, it's now one of the most successful product lines in history. The other stream looks at what would you do to the mothership, and they run their process and they report back. And when they show up with new ideas at the end, because they don't attack them in the same way. And so we found this process works remarkably well, and in weeks we find we can credibly move leadership management thinking 3 years ahead in that 10-week period. And the opportunity cost of not doing that is kind of infinite today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And very quickly, there's a question come up. I just want to talk about MTPs. I can't agree enough about an MTP being really important. For me, it's the first thing that needs to happen. Is there any advice you have for the community here in terms of how to put that in place and how to actually get your senior team on board with an MTP?
Sure. So two thoughts. One is it should really be the founders that put it together. It's the core problem that the organization is trying to solve. In the wrong way of doing it is, what business are you really in? You know, and if you don't know that, you have a problem. If you're just selling stuff to markets because it's cool, I think when I think of the failure of BlackBerry, they became enormously successful, but they didn't have a massive purpose to guide them as to what they wanted to do with that success, and they basically plateaued and then fell. Right? Google shows up and says, oh, we want to organize the world's information, or Uber says everybody's private driver, and it's very clear where they're going. And so it acts as a North Star for that. What we find is over time, you'll start to hire employees based on that. Right? So if we're saying, hey, we want to transform business globally, which is our MTP, then it naturally attracts those change agents that want to do the same thing. And I think we'll end up hiring people based on the mapping of the company MTP with the individual's MTP. The last point I would make is it should be declarative. People often say, we're going to be a great company. Today, you have to say, we're going to organize the world's information. It's actually a declaration for the community to gather and do it, not just them. Uber doesn't say, we will provide everybody's private driver. They just say, we want everybody to have a private driver. Right? And so that way it's a call to action for the community. So those are a couple of thoughts to guide that.
No, that's a really interesting point. And I mean, I've seen some charts we don't have right now, but just in terms of employee loyalty, because it overlaps, their purpose overlaps with the purpose of the business. You're starting to see these businesses really scale aggressively, and to retain their staff. I mean, some of the metrics are really compelling from this perspective. So thanks for that. There is a question here from Maria around your thoughts on the traditional material manufacturing companies in construction. I presume you're going to talk a bit about 3D printing here, but I'll defect to you. The question is, what would your advice for traditional construction material manufacturing companies be?
Okay, great question. This especially when it seems that construction and materials engineering is not that disruptible. I think there's 2 or 3 areas I'd look at. One is look at a project called the Materials Project, which is an open source project that has cataloged 500,000 compounds and cataloged their electrical, chemical, and physical properties. Say we kind of want to create a new battery, and you might guess that lithium ion is better than lithium sulfur or lithium whatever. Whereas here you can just go in and plug in the components that you want, and poof, it spits out the 5 things that meet your criteria. So we're now open sourcing that concept. I think the second, there's some incredible progress in nanomaterials happening to allow new types of concrete that extract carbon and other things. I think the bigger thing coming out of construction, though, is we are going to need to rebuild all of our coastal cities globally as climate change accelerates. In Florida, the sea level is rising 1 centimeter a year, and literally we'll have to, in the 20s, we actually lifted Chicago 2 meters, and we might have to do the same in Miami. And so I think it's going to be the biggest construction boom in the history of mankind over this next couple of decades, and I would position yourself to take advantage of that. The third thing is that we need to re-architect all of our infrastructure. Today, we build infrastructure for the early 20th century. We need to be building infrastructure for 2050, not 1950. And if you can position yourself for that, then some, for example, if you're building a building, as autonomous cars come along, you don't need parking lots. And the 3 floors you have in the building for parking lots can now be rentable office space, or build the parking lots, but make them easily convertible into office space. So those are some ways of thinking about it.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really fascinating question. I think there was another really interesting angle which Jeff Holden at Uber, their head of product, was talking about urban areas really changing with the drive of autonomous vehicles in terms of how properties are purposed, how urban landscapes are going to change. And I think this really will impact kind of how we think about construction generally. So thanks for that. I have one question for you, Salim, just conscious that you might need to shoot off. We've got Cesar going to be talking to us a bit about blockchain. I'd love to get your thoughts on blockchain and how relevant this is as a technology for existing organizations. And what's your kind of outlook on this?
Wow, where do I start? So I think the blockchain is the most single disruptive technology I have ever seen, because the internet was great as an open communication platform, but we've tried with great difficulty to have secure transactions on it. And the blockchain allows security where you need to know that something happened. We get rid of the middleman. And so for example, most government services are saying, yes, you have the driver's license, yes, you're the right age, etc. Now we can get rid of a lot of those. Oh, sorry, folks, I think you're just...
Okay, well, anyway, Salim, if you can hear us, a massive thank you for taking the time to join us. I know you've got a very busy schedule and you're traveling clearly at the moment. It's always inspiring hearing you talk and share about exponential organizations. So thank you very much. I'd like to then pass on to Juan Carlos, who is of Wider Pool, to talk you through a bit about our platform and how we're trying to extend exponential change.
Thank you very much for being here. Massive thank you also to Salim for taking the time to be together with us. So really happy to share with you our experience in the field of the open innovation. So I'd like to start with a view about what is Wirepool and what's our view about open innovation. So let me start with our MTP. That's not other than to merge the unique advantages of startups and corporates to expand their latent value. And so Wirepool is a concept of bringing technology, communities, and capital opportunities into one global innovation ecosystem. And that's why I start. And following the message of Salim, it's clear that exponential technology brings exponential change, and every industry will be disrupted by exponential technologies. With this artificial intelligence or the blockchain or the cybersecurity or 3D, wherever. The only question that we have is when it will happen in your business or in your sector, and we have to be ready for this because it's happening day by day. So this creates a global need, where most of our corporates needs to grow in new markets and seek to acquire new capabilities and solutions, connecting with early stage technologies through that this open innovation model. So if you see most of even non-tech companies in different sectors like media, industrials, healthcare, business services, we see how new corporate venture capital are appearing in the market. And like last year, the growth of this type of investment was the 66% of growth, and more than $31 billion in private market funding in thousands of new deals. So this is a global need. And one question that I have, especially in this community of CIOs, CTOs, and digital leaders, is which is our role and what's the current context in the C-level, and how to face this innovation challenge, and how we can protect against this situation, and even how we can generate new opportunities. So this technology disruption drives business growth, and the C-level and you, like digital leader, are expected to be able to translate innovation into those new capabilities and prevent from new competitors, and also to bring opportunities to grow. So I have to say that we see the role of our CIOs, the people who is in charge of technology, in those two main goals, as to help the sustainable growth and to protect your company against tech threats from third parties. So what we see orient for you today in how we change this challenge and become an opportunity is if we look for these four pillars. That first of all is bringing speed. Users and consumers will demand hundreds of new initiatives to be developed in the next few years. So we need to accelerate the time to market for solutions. We need to bring talent, and the corporates needs that cutting edge access. So early growth techs can bring those best teams worldwide in a very small niche. And of course, to try to prototype or to bring new concepts, to create new products, and focuses only in the customer journey instead of investing huge efforts in developing or creating those new products. And at the same time, companies, and especially those roles that were in charge of buying technology in the past, will need to change to be more open to partnerships, innovative partners that will facilitate commercial and potential also investments partnerships. So that's the four main skills that we need to create. And one opportunity is clear, it's about integrating startups with corporates. But we see that this, in our experience in more than 8 years before, is that it's very complex and multifaceted. So we know that, of course, for many companies to interact with startups is a mission critical. And also for many startups, they see corporates as strategic partners. But there are serious difficulties in the language and thinking, in how we take decisions and the time that we take for that, and how we manage the risk, and how we incentivize our people to do it and to go in that direction. So the methodology of open innovation that we propose, and it works in many large organizations that are in that exponential list that Salim has mentioned, is about to scout, create, and match. So the corporates has to prioritize the challenge based on the strategic objectives. And then you will look for the best tech initiatives and teams that has created any solution, but the right solution in any part of the world. And to assure the perfect match between the challenge and the tech solution, we will need an integration plan with commercial, operation, and other specific implementation actions in a very clear plan. So what we like to call to this process is to generate the corporate API. That's a capability to connect, to have an ecosystem of connection, more agile with these type of startups or early growth companies. So that will allow us to connect in a collaborative ecosystem with these companies in few months. So we define like 6 clear steps for this. First, as I mentioned, to identify and prioritize the business challenge that the corporate has. Maybe one corporate could have, at least I know Telefonica this year is launching around 40 different challenges in different countries. If you take the next 4 that your business user, your business units needs today, and prioritize, you can start with something clear. Second, let's promote worldwide and scout, again, worldwide. Get attraction from the startups in a global environment. Having a good connection in local accelerators, incubators, local startups is really good, because you get culture of entrepreneur, and you get not only culture, but also access to good ideas. But surely the best idea, the best solution for your challenge, maybe it's not in your neighborhood, it's not in your country, could be in any part of the world. So to do the curation of the best candidates, you also will add professional criteria and expert juries to select the best candidates. I've seen many companies doing a lot of effort creating a PR campaign, creating and promoting their challenge and looking for solutions. But at the end, they define an Excel with some criteria. They look for people that has a very, very weak selection, and that could be a problem. So after this creation, taking the right people and the right criteria, you can analyze and take a final decision combining strategic, tech, cultural, and financial vision. And as an output of this process, you'll get a term negotiation, the term sheets, where you will define the commercial and potential share participation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And finally, with this type of sprints that also Salim has mentioned, with flexible teams, I'm sure that you can create in less than 10 weeks integration of the product and the team. So that's what we call all this process. We call it a global call for innovation. That's a smart, intelligent model to adequate source and selection. So in average, when we do this type of challenge or calls, global calls, we get for each challenge of each corporate around 80, 100 startups worldwide that validate the required information about how to solve the solution and the challenge. So when you start to define criteria and you define your algorithm with the scalability and that startup capabilities, like how is the team, how is the product, how many references you have, how scalable is the product, then you get with the top 25. Then in that group, we recommend to bring experts. That's the jury that will help the corporate to define sadly if that is the right solution and if they have the right moment to help you. And with that group, we'll get the top 10, where we will put more focus having key interviews with executives, with the key executives in the startups, and a deeper due diligence, especially in the product side. Then finally, with the ranking, you'll have the top 3, the 3 winners, in which we will negotiate and close final agreements. So if we see this like a funnel, I don't think that today any corporate can have problems to identify thousands of startups. There are many databases. What we have done is aggregate multiple sources. And today we have access that it's there, it's in internet, it's in the database, and many companies that has access to information about startups, more than 1.8 million of startups. So the process is not going there, is scouting the right ones and selecting the right ones in a funnel way, which will bring us a term of agreement. And I like to stop here because many companies used to ask, okay, I'm not in the moment about investing, so why I should take the time and to negotiate a potential investment. I have seen several times, and we have many examples of when you start to create a pilot or a commercial agreement with a startup, it happens that the new enterprise, different company acquired that startup. So after 1 year working, even creating a spin-off of the product, you finally lose your opportunity. So it's very good to have from the beginning very clear, if possible, in these dynamic environments, commercial agreements that allow us to contribute or to receive a part of the contribution that the corporate gives, and any type of commercial agreement that brings shared revenues models will help so much, especially in the B2B2C environments. And second, let's negotiate the potential investment that will give us the security that if the commercial pilot works and after 1 year, 2 years, or wherever, I need to take a participation to defend, to protect my position there, or even if other competitors are starting to work in that space, I can have a chance to work better. And I also would like to define the two main models that we bring here. One is the collaborative global calls, and the other is the exclusive tailored call. Collaborative global call in a space like CIONET, where you have commitment and you have confidence, it's clear that several corporates, sometimes in the same sector, sometimes in the same region, sometimes with the same values, they could create and they could identify common problems to search and to select the right startups for those common problems. And there is many advantages doing that. In some cases, it's clear that you need exclusive tailored call, because for specific problems that require personalization, you need to be without other companies of your sector, or even is too specific for yourself. So the other thing that I would like to talk about is a community like CIONET allow us to many experts, where you are invited, really invited to engage, to learn, to grow, and to take as much participation as you want. In this type of process, where we want to integrate a company, a mature company, with a startup, we need three types of expertise. Is the expertise based on the new technology, the expertise based on the sector, and the expertise based on the business process. So a combination of that gives us the right criteria to select the right one, and to have the final candidates to work together with the corporate. So finally, I would like to make sure that I bring some benefits for everybody that participate today, and also for the community. We are working together to create a program of innovation, and this is part of the inspiration. And so we'll be working with CIONET in the different countries to bring more content and relevant content, and a community where you could have a clear benefit of using that community for attracting and selecting the right startups to work with. So I think, and we really believe that this collective effort, it's clear that if you do it alone, it's very inefficient, it's expensive and complex. So taking a community like CIONET is much easier and faster. So we'll, as a group, will have access to amazing resources like we had today with Salim, and we will be much more attractive for many successful startups that maybe your region, your country, your company could be complex for that startup to come to work with. So the attraction provoked by a group of corporates will be a multiplier, and will be much useful to and faster to bring that corporate, that startup to the corporate. And you can make it like the great world champions are doing, like Google, Amazon, Samsung, Apple. I mean, and most of these companies are using this methodology, very similar, and they are growing thanks to this. And finally, I also would like to mention that this position in the CIO, the CTOs, and especially in the digital leader, becomes being the facilitator of the technological innovation. That's a clear role that we see in the CIONET. So as Salim mentioned before, if you aren't disrupted yourself, someone else is. So I really think that we need to go faster in this process. Thank you very much, and I'm very open to any question after Cesar.
Yeah, Juan Carlos, thank you so much for talking us through that. Really interesting. And sorry, Cesar, I know we're running a bit on, but I'm going to hand over to you without further ado. Why don't you take us through your stuff and blockchain? Really interested to hear this.
So first of all, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here with a very committed community from CIONET. I always enjoy when talking to people that get together to, develop themselves and help their companies to move forward. I'm being here during the World Cup for all of you. It's great. So thank you very much. We appreciate your time. So we're going to talk about blockchain. Blockchain is a deep topic, and also it's a topic that cannot be covered in 10 minutes. So what I'm going to be doing is focusing on what I think are the key messages and the key things that we need to know about this. And then, of course, I will be available for any follow-up on the topic. Since this is a topic that I've been following and study very closely since 2013. To start, I would like just to have a feeling of the audience, and if you can just put in the chat or write in the chat if any of you or has been in contact with cryptocurrencies, with Bitcoin. If you own a cryptocurrency or you own a Bitcoin, you can just write yes, and then we will see how many yeses we get, but at least that will be a first good understanding. I will ask another question as we move forward. So I see that we started with some yes there. Okay, so let's talk about blockchain. Blockchain in general, people refer to blockchain as the technology behind the Bitcoin, but it is much more than that. A very good way to see it is that is the mix between two very important innovations, cryptography and distributed system. When those two things were put together in a new and innovative way, we have what is called the blockchain. There are tens of different blockchains. I personally have identified over 75 different blockchains. Some of them are blockchain platforms, and some of them are software providers, and they are all part of these different blockchains and distributed ledgers out there in the market. Some of the blockchains are public. The ones that are better known as platforms are public in the public domain are Bitcoin and Ethereum, but there are also private networks, and those are important. And a hyperledger is also one that is working very well as a private network as well as public, and at the same time as a software provider. So in more detail, without go too much deep, what is this? What is blockchain? So blockchain first is a ledger. So basically, it's a database. It's a database where people can write information, and one certain amount of information is completed. It is put together in a block, and that block is immutable, so the records are immutable. Once you write it in the change, you cannot modify it, and that's a very important concept. The second piece is that it's shared. So what it means that it's shared is that it's not is normally for this to work makes sense when different people, different organizations or companies get together and participate. So it could be a private consortium of some people that already do business, or it could be a large community or many people that don't even know each other. But given the fact that this is a secure network and is distributed, and I will comment on this too, they all gain trust and they can be shared. So talking about security is secure because you use the latest on cryptography, and also the fact that it is the network is secure and is immutable, make easy to generate that trust and the shared truth that we need. And it's distributed. That is another key piece of the blockchain, which means that it's not only one central database. That database has many replicates. Every person participated in the chain is able to have a replica, and they can do the staking, the mining, everything that is needed to secure the network, and they are part of it, and they have all the information. Everybody has the information, so that's a distributed. Then what I want to talk a little bit is about this distribution piece and decentralization. And we are all familiar with the platform economy. We have seen how Facebook, Salesforce, PayPal, many others has grown. And then more recently, we see how the new chain economy is all over with services like Airbnb and Uber, a couple of very clear exponential organizations, companies linked to the message from Salim. And now what we are moving is in this truly peer-to-peer peer-to-peer economy where it is decentralized, distributed, and it is a very important change in the industry, and that's why people consider that this decentralization together with the security that it provides is one of the most important disruptions. So, and it brings very clear benefits. It improve efficiencies, it improve also the security, improve the speed, and at the same time increase revenues and decrease the cost, and that has a lot of savings as well. So this is the concept of decentralization that is behind the blockchain that is very important to understand. And then what's happening with blockchain is that this is changing very dramatically many industries that are very heavy in transactions. So digital currency is the first one with the Bitcoin, but it's more than Bitcoin or more than a cryptocurrency. It will be the e-commerce, the global payments, the remittances industry, the peer-to-peer lending, the microfinance. All that is being disrupted already. Then the second one is the smart contracts, how you deal with digital rights, wire and escrow, for example, and I will talk more about smart contracts in a slide soon. Then the security business also in the financial sector is being disrupted. Now equity and how people raise money in venture capital is being disrupted. We have private markets, crowdfunding, derivatives, future, etc., etc. And then the record keeping also in healthcare, in titles, ownership, voting. Salim mentioned some examples. We're talking about the blockchain on how this is changing identity. So all this record keeping is being really disrupted. So as we can see, it's many areas that the technology is touching right now. It's also good to say that many of those are still on proof of concept. The two that I consider are beyond the proof of concept. The first one is Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, basically, from my perspective, and many other people in the industry, is doing to money what the email did to the letter. So that's the kind of disruption we are seeing, and that's happening, and that's why I was asking, who is already investing on Bitcoin. And from my personal experience, if we are not traders and we are investors, we should still do it, because once you buy $100 in Bitcoin, you start to follow what's going on and you start to understand what's happening. And that's the first killer application that is out there, is working from my perspective, and can be debated, but from my perspective, Bitcoin will be there for a long time. Things can change, other things can come, but the concept and the Bitcoin from my perspective will be there. The second application that is there and is beyond a proof of concept are the smart contracts. So the smart contract basically is what developers are doing, writing codes, what some parties agree, and that code, they put it into the blockchain. So it's a mix of business, contracts and legal and lawyers, and code, and it's amazing seeing how these three things combine together. Then that code is written basically once one of the events trigger a point, like for example an expiration date or a specific price, the contract executes itself without human intervention, and that's make things very transparent, very clear, and also very effective. Ethereum is the platform that is being advancing or more recognized on the smart contract, but there are other several platforms that are also developing this concept of a smart contract. And it's a big disruption in industry, insurance, for example, also in the law firms industry is a big disruption, and having those contracts be able to be smart is great. And then from the regulation perspective, it's also very useful, because those smart contracts and the blockchain itself allow regulators and allow third parties to recognize what is the activity in the market, but at the same time keep the privacy of the actors. And that's very important, because it's another important concept behind the blockchain. So the impact across industries is huge. The financial industry is the first one, and we talk about Bitcoin very briefly, but all the financial sector is looking how to redesign the workflows. This is an opportunity also to improve liquidity and free up some capital, for example, when you have the security tokens, also to help to reduce infrastructure costs and increase the transparency. Here is one example that is happening. It's a company in Brazil that serve the micro entrepreneurs in Brazil, and is becoming the new banking in a decentralized way, for all these entrepreneurs, giving access to cash and giving access to liquidity, and giving the access to compete with large institutions, because it gives access to many things. So this is only one example. There are many, but definitely the financial sector is one of the industry that is being impacted. Then the retail manufacturer is not the exception. Everything related to trade finance is very transaction oriented. All that is very transaction oriented is there to be disrupted. And then we have also all the tracking for product, the traceability, and the provenance that's also there to be disrupted. Here are a couple of examples, both of them one of them in Latin America, the other one in Iberia and Spain. So Implaza is a fintech company, or a fintech trade platform that is there to help small exporters to compete at a global level in a very automated way. So they allow those smaller manufacturers or smaller service providers to connect, negotiate, transact, administer all these contracts and exportations. And then this is an example, globally accelerator, of how a digital agency become a lead generation, and a lead generation that is decentralized and is offered now as a service in a decentralized platform. Then health is also an industry that is being disrupted. The main thing there is it removed the fact that you need third-party verifiers, for example, for medical records, and it really provides fast and secure access to personal medical records. So on the right side is the company in Latin America that is making the optimum health easy, focusing the patient and making sure that they facilitate how the patient interact with the medical institutions. And one of the key things that they do is help them to manage the medical records. The other one on the left is a company in South Florida. It's also in the health space. It's called Wellways. And what they do is they put together blockchain and artificial intelligence with the aim of stopping cancer from taking the lives of women. And that's very much focused on rewarding the community, getting the community together behind a very important cause, and also allowing them access to digitalize their data. The government is not an exception. Government is a great opportunity for blockchain. It increases transparency, traceability, how the money is spent, also for a smart contract. And here I'm bringing the example of Civics. Civics is the economy for abundance, and it's basically the token of the EXO Foundation, and is the token that will allow all the companies in the EXO ecosystem to transact between them, and then to help cities and civilizations to do the same and take all into the economy of abundance. So that's another interesting example close to us. So how Fluid Chains does it? We do it in 4 phases. We start with a theme phase that follow the methodology of exponential organization. Then we do the prototype and all the readiness phase. During that phase we use the lean startup principles with two sprints of 5 weeks with weekly deliveries, like basically the developing business as developing software. And then we do also the execution, the issuance, the operations, and then finally we do the integration. From Fluid, what is important is to facilitate transformational blockchain projects, and that's our MTP. The lessons learned during this period that we've been working with the corporates and also with entrepreneurs in the space of blockchain are the following. The first is that this is a topic that I presented here in a very simple way to make sure that we all understand each other. But we all need to educate. Even if you've been in the industry for some period, you have to keep learning, and that's very important because it's an early technology. It's changing a lot, not only from technology itself, but also from regulation perspective, market dynamics. So it's very important to educate all of us in this area and to keep learning as the industry develops. Then the second thing is encryption and safe data management are important not only because of the technology or because the IT department and the fraud. It's important because at the end it helps to better manage the business, and blockchain could be an essential technology to help you on that task. Also, protecting the customer data, we should not just do that because it's a regulation, but we should do it because really provide a better services to customers. So again, connecting the technology with the business and the business models is essential. We need to plan beyond the peak that every technology have and look toward the future and how definitely is going to be a technology that is going to be for us for a long time, as the web technology did during the past, 2 decades, I would say. Blockchain is a reality, and we need to understand those implications, the implication that technology will have in our business. Every single business is there to be disrupted. Blockchain is one of the technologies that can disrupt. There are many other ones, but it's one that has a huge impact across different businesses. So it's very important to understand those implications and connect with projects in your specific industry. If you don't decide to do your own project, at least you have to connect and understand what's going on with projects in your industry, be part of those communities and participate. And then the last one here is the importance of creating an experimentation plan, defining steps to be executed, during the next few weeks. If we can achieve that after this webinar, I think, that's a great take-home value for all of you. From all those ideas that you have, that I'm sure are very good ideas, how you move those forwards and make sure that you disrupt yourself before somebody come and disrupt you. So with that, I will finish. I will be available, for questions, and then available for any follow-up. This is my LinkedIn information, and thanks again for all the for the time and for the opportunity.
Cesar, thank you very much. Really, really interesting. So I just want to check if we have any questions from the participants for either Cesar or Juan Carlos. Cesar, in terms of kind of your blockchain accelerator, you've talked us through kind of the process. What would your advice be for a CIO or CEO who hasn't yet considered blockchain for their business? What would the first step be for trying to identify other opportunities within the business, or even at the fringes, as Salim was talking about, trying to drive exponential changes at the fringe of a business? What would your advice be in terms of trying to figure out, how this sort of decentralized type of application can apply to their business?
Yeah, thank you, Adarsh. So the first thing I would say is the personal journey. So from the personal journey of each of us, my recommendation is put $100 and get some Bitcoins and start understanding how it works if you haven't done it. Then look for projects that are close to your passions and join those communities and start interacting with those communities. There are many projects there. There are over 2,000 now. They all are very open, and they receive, collaboration. I'm sure with your expertise and your knowledge in industry and technology, you will be very well received, and you can add a lot of value to those projects. So that's from the personal perspective. Go and put something in there and start learning. That's the best way to learn, because the technology is moving very fast. The space is moving very fast. And if you start just reading books, and which is also important, and you start doing it, you are going to be behind. Then from the company perspective, it's very important to work with your leadership team, align your digital transformation strategy. If you don't have a digital transformation strategy, the EXO ecosystem can help you in different ways. You can run a sprint to identify that strategy. You can get an innovation call from wider pool, for example, to connect with some other startups, as Juan Carlos was saying. If you already have a digital transformation strategy, so start working on the two different directions, as Salim was saying. You have to work on the edge with very innovative project that runs separately from your company, like Apple does, in the example from Salim. And then you have to work at your core also, which is what I call this dual digital transformation. And that's how you guarantee that your team and your organization gain some capabilities and gain flexibilities to scale that are very much needed. Also how your current business model is extended. And then at the same time, doing these new projects that could be working with an innovation call or investing in a startup or creating your own project in blockchain or in artificial intelligence or in a specific topic in your area, and make those projects independently on the edge. So those will be my recommendations.
Really good. We have another question here from Luis Carlos Vaquero. Cesar, if you identify opportunities for blockchain in a company, how can you select a partner or facilitator, and how to budget for these kinds of projects?
Yeah, it's a good question. The blockchain space is a space that has get bad press, and that's important to understand. And that bad press is not for free. So there are many groups and many companies there or people that are doing projects just to hit and run. Let's put it that way. But there are many others that are committed to the long term of the industry, the long term of the technology, and that's one of the key things that I will look and make sure that whatever partner I choose is a partner that is there for the long run, that is planning beyond any hype. I would say anyone that will come to you telling that you can make a lot of money on the short term, better to look that carefully. It could be, but I would rather prefer someone that tell me you can establish a business with a good MTP that change the work, and then you can make some money on the long term. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is access to resources. One of the key things now in blockchain, many companies, many projects limit the resources. So engaging with companies that have access to large base of developers, large base of consultants is key, because if you don't get access to the right talent, and so it's going to be a problem. Going to be a problem for your project. I would say those are the two things I will look very careful. We will look for companies that have developed projects with with other companies that are serious in the space, and there are many corporations doing it now. It's not only a startup. There are many corporations. I present some here, but there are many others outside in the market, large corporations, global corporations even doing this kind of projects.
Thanks, Cesar. Another follow-on question from Douglas Gonzalez is which projects are more suited to a public blockchain network and which ones to a private one?
Yeah, great. Thank you for the question. It's a good question. The private blockchains are mostly for consortiums. Let's say 5 different partners that they already do business, and they want to do the business in a better way, in a most effective way. If they want to compete with a larger company, or they get together in an association with larger company and they improve the industry as a whole. So that's a kind of a good consortium approach for the public, for the private blockchains. So it's a little bit like the intranet and the internet. So the public blockchain will be like an intranet, and space that has all the advantages of the blockchain technology, but it is controlled by this group of people that get that consortium. And then on the public one, is more for large communities when you want to involve a lot of people and get all of them, part of your governance. And you want, you really have a use case for your token. You really have a clear tokenomics for that. At that point, you can go and do a public project.
Great, thank you for that. Well, I guess just to summarize, for me, I mentioned it before. One of the technologies I'm most sort of passionate about, and Salim also articulated this in his response, is blockchain. I do think that it is in our era, possibly even more important for us than the bringing about of the internet. I mean, it really does replace administration. This is where transactions between individuals, consumers can happen with trust without the need for centralized systems. So, really, I think compelling and transformational bit. So the parting thought I would give you is to really think about your MTP, think high level, away from your business. And if you can form that, it's much easier to understand how you can actually create a blockchain-based application for your business, if that is indeed the technology that will help you sort of translate across. But yeah, absolutely think that in the future, decentralized systems are going to be a thing. Whether you're going to be a part of it or not, I would say that's definitely something to think about. If it doesn't come around by your own disruption, it will certainly disrupt your business directly or around the fringes. And with that, I'm gonna bring the call to a conclusion. Please, if you do have follow-on questions, after this call, I would like you to please send them through. If you have any specific points for either of our speakers, or you're interested in something regarding the XO Works, the XO Foundation, or have questions for Salim, you can send them through. I'm just going to put our email address for Eileen, who's been our administrator on this call, Eileen @CIONET.com. Please direct everything or any questions to her or queries to her. That includes any queries for wider pool or for Cesar. If you're interested in having a further conversation with us or about blockchain, don't hesitate to come through. And then the final point is that there will be a survey that will be sent across to you. I believe Eileen will send that across. It would be really useful for you to give us your feedback so we can improve the call. We can actually adapt it so that the content is important and relevant for you guys in the future. So the feedback is really beneficial to us. We hope to have a series of these calls, usually quarterly, and keep this momentum going. You're part of a wonderful and growing community. It's amazing that we've had not only FluteChain, the XO Foundation, but also Wider Pool and CIONET as a community. We're all connected. These are your resources that you can access. So with that, I just wanted to thank you for participating in the call today, and look forward to engaging with all of you in the near future. So with that, I want to thank you and wish you all the luck in whichever teams you're supporting in the World Cup. And if I don't speak to you during the summer, have a wonderful break.
Thank you very much, Adarsh. See you. Thank you very much, everybody, and good summer. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.